Mary Pete, Annie here. Welcome back to Tarot Together. And finally, after all those introduction videos, the beginning of my sharing with you my study of the major arcana, starting with the Fool card. You may be working with a Rider-Waite deck, in which case this discussion on the symbols on the card will align to the card you have in front of you. You may be working with a Rider-Waite clone deck, as I described in one of my earlier videos. So you may find it interesting to discover what of these symbols exist on the clone deck that you are using. Maybe not captured exactly the same way, but captured in feeling or use of art and expression. You may have a deck that is not a Rider-Waite clone, and these symbols just don't seem to show up, or show up very rarely, in the deck that you have in front of you. However, how about the meaning of the card that you have in front of you? Look to the little white book that came with your deck, or perhaps your deck had an expanded resource of some kind that went along with it. Note the meanings of the card and see how they aligned to the symbolic meanings on the Rider-Waite deck. What we'll discover in great part is if we have a Rider-Waite deck, it'll match the symbols that I'm about to discuss in this video. And if we have a clone, a lot of the symbols will show up, or they'll show up, if not identically, somehow in spirit on the card. And if we have a deck that the artwork took off in a way that is not inclusive of the symbols, the symbolic meaning somehow, more than likely, still informs the meaning of the card you hold in your hand. So perhaps this understanding of the symbols on the Rider-Waite will lead you to understand, well, why then did someone say at some point, for instance, that the Fool represents certain things? So, on to the symbols on the Fool card. I share these because they come from my research of some things I've grown to agree with and some things I don't. I'll make comments on that. I'm very interested in what you know of the symbols that I mention as I go through each of the cards and their symbolic meaning in turn. You might have symbols I don't know about. I can guarantee you that if you are someone who's very aligned to the astrological connections of the tarot, you'll know things about the symbols on the cards I do not, because I'm not expert in that. I'm also not expert in the Kabbalah and its influence on the cards. There's two areas I know that you will be able to, via comments or on our Facebook group, share information that I will learn from, in addition to your agreeing or disagreeing thoughts on the meaning of the symbols of the cards, and your new things that you can point out to me and to viewers and to our group. The sources of the symbols on the Fool card and all of the cards in the Rider-Waite deck come from so many places. I've mentioned those in other videos. I won't go back through them again. Now, there is a source to the symbols. There's also what Waite himself decided to toss in to the tarot mix. Nothing on the cards is there by accident. That is the fascination of studying the meaning of the symbols on the cards. How I'm going to handle these discussions of the symbols on the cards is by putting the card in front of you. My face doesn't have anything of import to add to the discussion. What matters is the card itself and the imagery I'm referring to when discussing the symbols. So, for the duration of this video, until I return to say farewell, I will put in front of you a copy of the Rider-Waite Fool card. Now let's explore the symbols that are part of that card. So let's begin by looking at a picture that is the Fool card.
To start with, just take a look at it, especially if you're new to studying the tarot. What do you see? What leaps out to you first? Most of us have eyes drawn to the central figure of the Fool. We might also notice the dog, who seems to be at his heels, the cliff he stands on, the sun in the sky, and the mountains in the background, and of course, the abyss. Whatever it is that's off the edge, down to the left-hand side of the card, into the abyss. So look at the card for a minute. Then close your eyes and see if you can answer a couple of questions. Oh, if you're used to the card, probably you can, but test your memory anyway. And if you're new, it'll give you an idea for the power of symbolism. What color is the sun? Remember now, you're not looking at the card. You've taken your eyes away from it, maybe close them for the moment. What color is that sun? How about the sky? What's the Fool wearing? Do you remember the color of his clothing, the design on it? Do you remember the belt? What are the color of his boots? What's his body language tell you about his frame of mind and emotions? Did you notice what was engraved or embroidered upon the wallet? That's the package at the end of the staff that he carries. How about the color of the staff? What kind of flower is he holding in his left hand? And what color is it? What kind of detail comes to your mind? All of these things that I mentioned and more are part of the symbolism of the tarot, and that's what we're going to explore in this video on the symbolism of the tarot card, the Fool. Look back at the card again now. Do you notice more detail now than you did before? Can you enter the card more deeply when you realize it's rather intricate in design? And are you intrigued by the fact that all those intricacies have a purpose and they have a story to tell? Let's explore this story a bit through the symbolism on the card. Let's start with the sky. The sky's not blue, it's yellow. There is very often a yellow rather than a blue sky in the Rider-Waite deck, and the sun often appears prominently in that sky. The traditional association of the color yellow is that it is associated with the superconsciousness or the highest level of consciousness. Yellow is also symbolically a color of insight and intelligence. So this sky, which is the unusual color of yellow, connects it to the highest level of consciousness and also to insight and intelligence. In that sky is a sun. Look at the color of the sun. The sun's not yellow. The sun is white. Every now and then, I'm going to share something that's a direct quote, because when reading a book or inspired by a website, I see something that interests me. I'll try and capture it and the reference to it. And I'll give you an idea of some of the books that have inspired me in my studies. This regarding the sun is from Ruth and Wald Amberstone's book, The Secret Language of Tarot. So this is a direct quote that I'm reading from them. It's good advice to us because it reminds us that every time we see a sun in the tarot, it doesn't mean the same thing. Here's their quote. Suns, like moons and stars, change their meaning card to card. For instance, moons differ by their phases and stars by their number of points. For suns, there can be a difference in their points and also in the kind of sky they are in. There are also many different kinds of sun symbols, and they make appearances in the tarot. The alchemical sun, the Kabbalistic sun, the Masonic sun, the Egyptian sun, the astrological sun, the mythological sun, the psychological sun, and the scientific sun. And any of those suns can be a combination according to the nature of the card. So Ruth and Wald Amberstone remind us that there's not a sun that appears throughout the tarot deck, that we have an opportunity to interpret the sun in many different ways. The Fool's sun can be referred to, sometimes is, as the Kabbalistic sun, what's called the scintillating intelligence. Well, that's a fancy way of saying it's the beginning from which the universe is born. I read someplace that when it comes to numerology on the card, that one of the powerful aspects of the card are the 14 rays that come out of the sun, which connect it to that scintillating intelligence, the beginning of all that is. Not being an expert on numerology, and you're going to discover that as I go through the symbols on these cards, I was curious to explore why 14 rays are important. I found some interesting things out, and that is that 7, the number 7, duplicated, so 7 times 2, is double the measure of spiritual perfection. 7 is the number of divine perfection, and 2 is the number of the incarnation of God the Son into the perfection of his humanity and his divinity. So the incarnation of God and divine perfection, 7 times 2, 7 and 7, gives us the power of the Kabbalistic sun, as might be seen on the Fool's card. You'll notice my reference to Christian symbolism. It's going to happen pretty much consistently throughout my interpretation of the symbols on the tarot, and that is because they are inspired in great part, but amongst other things, but in great part, Christian symbolism and meaning. But we don't have to connect to that at the religious level, because the power of divine perfection and the incarnation of God into the Son, for those of us who might not be following a Christian path like myself, the number 7 still represents the absolute mystery, the source of all that is. And 7 as the incarnation of God the Son, that is the experience, living as a human, of the divine nature of everything, which brings us the experience of living, and in fact our own divine nature. I never have a problem as a non-Christian relating to the Christian symbolism in the tarot, and I will always point out to you that symbolism when I know of it and what it has come to mean to me. Notice the color of this sun. If we move away from the fact it has its 14 rays and the power of that numerology, the sun's white, the color white. The meaning of it, as it will appear continually throughout the tarot, is that of light from a superior source, pure spirituality. It's the source and the unification of everything. As we go through the tarot and the sun appears, not only do we get all kinds of suns, but where the sun is located in the card is very important. It could be rising, setting, midday, beginnings, endings, or the height of attainment. The sun in the Fool card represents continuing enlightenment. It's still rising. It hasn't reached its zenith yet, and in fact, the important message of that is our spiritual sun never reaches a zenith. We're always questing like the fool. That white sun, it's a symbol of expansion, growth, energy, and creativity. In one of the books I read, it referred to it as the spiritual sun, always at a 45-degree angle. It never reaches its zenith, but it also never descends, and it's always on the rise. Wait referred to the energy of this card as the morning glory and keen air. He referred to the sun as the sun which shines behind him, knows whence he came, whither he's going, and how he will return by another path after many days. The yellow of the sky and the white of the sun. Seemingly the background images on the Fool card if we see him as front and center. But oh, how they influence and guide him, and therefore the meaning of the card. The presence of mystery and the source of everything, the wholeness of everything, higher consciousness and intelligence. Is that the background to something that could be literally defined as a fool? I think not. Instead, it invites us to explore the wisdom of the fool.
In honor of the length of time some of these videos will take on any given subject, I will split them into more than one video. So please stay tuned for part 2 on the symbols of the Fool, linked below.